Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sophia. I manage and organize Spectrum events for you, bringing the community together through learning at Spectrum. For those of you who are new to Spectrum, aside from holding events, we also offer curated workspaces for community experience and bringing together members and provide connections to expand your business. So today's webinar will be a conversation and a dialogue. We are very privileged to have Eugenia Gajardo, counselor and psychotherapist at Know Thyself. Eugenia has over 30 years experience in the personal growth and development field and provides counsel and guidance specific to a client's needs. She is an existential and eclectic practitioner who has developed her own treatment model based on extensive experiential and academic knowledge. Some of her areas of expertise are helping clients with motivation, confidence and self-esteem, borderline personality disorder, life purpose, emptiness, and creative blocks. Next, we also have the privilege of having Suguna Madhavan, Founder Director, Firesong Initiatives, Innovation and Management Strategist, Transformative Leadership Mentor-Coach. Suguna is the founder of Firesong Initiatives, a specialized business consultancy which focuses on collaboration to deliver innovative concepts to market. She is also a portfolio mentor to the Golden Equator Group. As a transformative leadership mentor coach to C-suite executives, founders, and entrepreneurs globally, her expertise is in the space of exponential growth for individuals and their businesses alike. Without further ado, let me welcome Suguna and Eugenia. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, please post them onto the Q&A window. So over to you, Suguna. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia, and welcome everyone who's joining us on today's conversation webinar. But to start with, I must say a bigger thank you to Eugenia, who without the last 1 year plus of conversations and prodding, persuading, it would have been very difficult for me, because being open and vulnerable in intimate circles is natural to me. But to be open and vulnerable on a webinar, on a public webinar, takes a great deal of courage. And without you, this wouldn't have been possible. So thank you, Eugenia. So when we look at today's topic, when we came up with the theme, living life extraordinarily in the face of deep disruption, I'm sure a few things popped up in our minds. So one would be extraordinarily. To do that at times of crisis would be deeply challenging. But what exactly do we mean by deep disruption? So disruption itself is a challenging thing, but deep disruption would mean different things to different people. That's because what I value is very different from what you value, and what is taken away or what is falling apart has very, very differing degrees of impact on us. So when we say deep disruption, I suppose it could be one of two things. It could be that one crisis itself has a magnitude upon one's normal life. It has a severe disruption onto our personal or professional life. At the same time, a deep disruption could be a series of challenges or crises that runs very quickly at the back of its heels and builds a little bit of like a domino effect. So that's my sense of what deep disruption means. What about you, Eugenia?
Very much so, yeah. Yes, there are those incredible moments that we think everything is kind of stable. Everything is kind of functioning and working and moving in a particular direction. And then something comes in that could be an uncontrollable or a controllable that got uncontrollable. You know, there is a world situation and affect us. There is a personal situation that affects us, but it's disrupting the natural course of things at that particular moment. And that could be seen as a tragedy, or it could be seen as a multiple series of opportunities.
That's beautifully said, as a series of opportunities. But when one is smack in the middle of it, oftentimes it is, extremely challenging. So to start with,
Exactly.
challenges that we may have faced or are facing on the professional side of our lives. Being in the space of innovation and startups for well over 20 years, I've had my fair share of heart attacks. But starting from one from some time ago, it was during the period of 2002, 2003. I was then heading up Virtu, which was just launched as the world's first luxury mobile phone. And it was a very, very high profile launch. The brand was also made public at the time. What we did at that time was also to take pre-orders from some very prominent clients, and the delivery of the product was due sometime in the summer of 2002. As it is sometimes with technology and product roadmaps, things were very delayed. And that caused a lot of stress for the entire team, and certainly for me and my team at that time. Not just because the clients that we had, taken orders from were prominent individuals, but these people had actually put so much faith and trust in us that they paid out beforehand. So anyway, through a lot of grit and determination, we managed to deliver the product a little bit later in the autumn, only to be faced with the outbreak of SARS at that time in November 2002. So you can imagine we had already invested also tremendously in flagship boutiques in Paris and Singapore. We had retail outlets around the world. And suddenly, pretty much like what we're facing right now with COVID-19, we had the outbreak of SARS, and that certainly had some severe impact on the business. So that was a time, the early days of startup for me, and I recollected, going through months of trying to actually manage that with the team. So that was on the professional front.
I think if I speak about my professional side, when I was about 14, 15, I was going to school in a bus, and I knew I wanted to be a businesswoman. It took me many years to actually come and run my own business in the way I had envisioned in Singapore. So it was Gajardo and Partners, and integrated marketing communication and public relations. And I had a design studio. And I went into it with all my heart and my soul. I worked towards it until that dream was realized in 1980, somewhere in the 1980s and mid-1980s. And then eventually I realized that I was running a parallel track with my business. My personal development and my personal growth, my self-knowledge track was very strong. So I was running my own business and running that personal track. However, the business was there as a forefront for me. And we were starting to have a diversification of that business, a growth, to have a school that will be dealing with etiquette at the time, but underneath personal growth and development. I had the investors, that was 2002, and then the IT bubble burst. As an integrated marketing communication, over the next year, budgets were cut down. Eventually, my main investor for the institute pulled back. And then eventually I saw myself with this business that I have put so much to build, and I had worked towards it since I was a young person. That was really, either I would put everything I had to make it work and to ride the wave, or what would it happen? I mean, there was a advertising agency at the time, a very large advertising agency that was willing to take this business on board, even under those conditions. But I had to really turn inwards and question myself. Do I really want to do this? Because that personal development track that I was running parallel to it was very strong. And then I saw the opportunity. And I thought, all of this can crash, but I can grow this part. This is a time that I can actually get out of this. I had to really inquire myself, was that something, the process of doing the business? Because it's not just about the communication and the strategic communication or everything that goes with it, the subject matter of the business, but it was also what I felt in my heart. And I thought, no, I am truly not a businesswoman. I am not. And this presents me with the opportunity to get out gracefully, if you wish. And so I turned that around. And I said, right, this is the opportunity. And I closed the business gracefully. And I pulled back and I said, I'm going to teach meditation. And eventually I became a counselor. And so am I until today. That was deep restructuring for me. It changed my life in so many ways, but something that was turned around.
Yeah, two things that you just said, Eugenia, just resonates with me. One is that, you know, at the time of crisis, it's not just something that we can define as professional or personal, because we are all just one person. And having the courage, having the inner insight to look within and find a perspective gives us, you know, that balance, right? And the second thing is, you know, when you're confronted with closing something that is so, you know, near to your heart, that you have actually poured all of yourself in it. I have closed more recent experience of that as well. It was in the period of 2014, 2015. Actually, I was just starting on my second set of sabbatical. I just had my third child, my son, at the very ripe old age of 46. And after building up yet another startup, Steinway Lindorf, with the management team and founder in Denmark, I so wanted to actually focus on my family life. But this really exciting project came up, and a friend of mine actually, Richard, if you are listening right now, if you signed on, invited me to lunch, told me about this project, and I ended up saying yes because I had a lot of passion for it. Around about the time I started, I committed to the chairman and the founder at that point in time to see the project to opening, and then I would leave to move on to what it was that I wanted to focus on. So there was about 15, 16 months of absolutely grueling, really round-the-clock work. Oftentimes we would be on the building site up to 2, 3 in the morning in the dark. And, you know, fortunately, through all of the hard work, tremendous discipline and dedication from the team that was pulling it together, it opened on time. However, there were, you know, some severe and unexpected series of challenges. There were rifts amongst matters of shareholding. There was disruption on funding. So even though I had groomed a successor to come on board, 6 months after I left the company and the business, the whole project closed down very suddenly. So although I wasn't the one like you to actually handle the closure, it was a very personal thing, and you know, it was very, very deeply distressing, to say the least. So that certainly rang a bell for me.
Yes, so, and the fear. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
And the fear, because I remember the fear. And what is fear? What is courage?
Yeah.
You know, because the fear, here I am, it's my business, it's my livelihood. You know, I mean, it's my livelihood. And I have a child being educated that I'm taking care of. Yeah, so the insecurity, you know, the huge fear of the insecurity. And that state of mind that allowed me to really turn that into courage and be able to step into the fear and to believe in myself, because a very deep belief that I actually could and I would was there. At the core, I had that belief.
Yeah.
I would and I could. So stepping into the fear is absolutely fundamental to be able to move forward and literally reinvent yourself sometimes.
And that's something that we're going to talk about as well, right? About courage, about fear, whether it exists in absence of each other. But talking about personal fears and personal experiences, the period 2002 was definitely one of deep disruption for me, because besides what was happening professionally on the virtual side of the business, I had also in that same year gotten married. I do pack things in, don't I? And I had also conceived at that time. It took me many years to speak about it openly, but I can speak about it a little bit more now. But it was a late miscarriage with a lot of the challenges that was happening in the office. You know, work was at a frenetic pace. I also was diagnosed some years earlier with a thyroid condition. And it could be a combination of both. Basically, at 20 weeks, I had a miscarriage in the office and was rushed to hospital. Unfortunately, we could not, protect the pregnancy. The whole thing happened very, very fast. At the same time, my gynae had also alerted me to the fact that there was a very fast-growing fibroid the size almost of a small orange. And it had also been competing for space, for air, for life itself with the baby. And there was also an ovarian cyst. So he wanted to have an immediate surgery. The whole thing happened really within like 24 hours. There was no time to think. And later on, it was only much later on that I realized at 20 weeks, there were many choices that you can make. But at that point in time, all I was told was that I had to go through induced labor and to ring the bell, said the nurse, when the fetus was delivered. But somehow at that time, I really wanted some quiet time. For me, for my spouse, it wasn't a fetus, it was a baby. We had named her Dharma, and we wanted some private time. So at the point of actually delivering our baby, I took the time, and she was so tiny, I could actually hold her in the palm of my hand. I could see the color of her eyes. And it was a very, very difficult and painful moment. I'm not sure about courage at that point in time, but I think in my younger days then, probably there was an element of stoicism, there was an element of perhaps avoidance, because 2 days after that, following the surgery as well, I recollected actually having my finance director and also my sales director for Southeast Asia in the hospital room having a meeting. And while many people actually said, oh, wow, you're extremely strong and courageous, I think it was just so overwhelming at that time that I pushed myself forward to just carry on. The passion for the work helped, but nonetheless, there really was a strong element of trying to get over it without actually processing it. The gift and the takeaway, though, was that some years later, probably just about a year later, I, so much in love with a venture that I had a building hand in, was able to find my inner sense, my inner sort of core, and at that time realized that my who is a lot more than the work that I do, however passionate I was. I'd spent the better part of 7, 8, 9 years living abroad, traveling 2 to 3 weeks a month for business. And my father had also died of cancer after a very short spell of 7 months of illness. And there was hardly any time to say goodbye. So all in all, through the grieving process, I learned the ability to actually cut the umbilical cord. Whatever it was that I fell in love with was building on the professional front. I was able to also see that as just one part of me and not all of who I am. And I ventured then at the end of 2003 on a personal sabbatical, taking time to spend with my loved ones, traveling to India, visiting Kerala, my father's birthplace, and also spending a lot more time writing the poetry that I do. So that was truly a time. It was a series of crises that, knocked me back. But, leading into several things that we'll talk about later, I was able to get back on my feet. And that was my personal, disruption, which on your today level, and also on the level of what has been happening, Eugenia, in the last 1 year, your story is a tremendous one. I do remember April of last year when we were together at Vijay's benefit, and that was the night that you found out about your health condition. And I think this is the time for you to share with us your thoughts, your feelings around that deep challenge.
I am deeply touched by what you shared. Life is not about comparing. We don't want to compare. We can't compare, especially between pain and pain. But I can feel the courage that you must have had to be able to courage, resilience, and yes, we will talk about that. But you are a living example of that, because the amount of strength that a human being needs in order to go through that is enormous. The attitude of mind. And I know that this will unfold into the talk, but I just want to tell you that I am humbled, and I would wish not to compare my reality, because it's not worse, it's just different. And we need to look at it as that. Yeah. And that night in the jazz gala event, when I was told that day, and I was going to meet you, I had made one decision. And my decision was, I am going to have a good time. My life is now within a frame. I've always known I'm going to die. I've dealt with death a long time ago. My process of personal development and growth. I've done an amount of courses, emotional work, and I lived 3 over years in an ashram. So, I have explored death from so many angles. So for me, that the doctor told me, you have a terminal disease, look at the x-rays. I didn't need the doctor to understand them. Healthy lung, my lung. Didn't have to go to medical school to see the difference.
And this is, the term for it is the interstitial lung disease?
It's the whole umbrella is interstitial lung disease. There are about 200 different varieties. And the variety I have is chronic, give me a second. Yeah. Whatever.
Hypersensitivity.
Exactly. Chronic hypersensitive, pulmonaitis. And that is accompanied by fibrosis and traction bronchostasis. But at that moment, being told that I had 3 to 5 years to live, to me was nothing. It was really, oh, okay, so now I know what my time frame was. It took me a while to come down and begin to realize the magnitude, simply because now I had to tell my daughter. And my daughter was abroad at that point, And I just say it was like a Thursday or Wednesday when they told me this was exactly the 5th of April of 2019. And I decided I will wait for her to come back. This is not something I will tell her on the phone, least of all on WhatsApp. And at that time, then my daughter, when she came back and I shared this with her, you know, I mean, for a child, no matter what age, she was 34, of course, she said, Mom, we're going to beat this. I said, no, there is nothing to beat. Look, we are going to fight this illness. I said, no, there is nothing to fight with. So she said, what are we going to do? I said, we'll work with it. These are the things we can't control in life. These are the things that it is what it is. It just is. So I had a full acceptance in my heart that this is it. It did not cause me distress. I experienced the distress considerably later, actually this year. When I had made a plan, I said, okay, forget 3 to 5 years, forget about the 5, I'm going to work with the 3. So in those 3 years, I have a plan. I know it's not entirely 3 years because part of it, I will not be very well towards the end. So, but 2.5, very good. I can do a lot of things, you know, and my brain began to plan, to say, okay, how I'm going to do, what are the key priorities, what do I need to take care of, all the practical things, but also the things from my heart, you know, began to see my relationships, prioritize my relationship, my art, what will I do with my art, how will I proceed from there, because that had a huge impact because of the hypersensitivity and the bronchoectasis and my using toxic materials in the art that I did. Yes, I am a counselor and an artist. I could not use them anymore. So that for me was devastating. That was very difficult because this was, you know, self-realization in my life. I wanted to be a painter for a long time, but I had to wait because I wanted to be a painter that does not need to sell her art. I wanted to do whatever I wanted, and if people liked it and bought it, would be a great gift to me. But if they didn't, it was okay. So I waited for a long time to get to that point in order to take my art career. So, and that happened in 2014, and this was only 2019. So, choose be a psychotherapist or be an artist, I couldn't be an artist anymore. So, second layer of planning. Okay, where is the opportunity here? If I cannot paint, what can I do? Write. Focus on writing. Begin to do my writing, because writing is also an art, you know, and it's a form of expression. So that was my opportunity, but it took me a year to actually let go of the painting. And my studio is still open. I still have my studio. For a year, for 8 months, I just could not go to the studio. I could not. I was tortured by it. So little by little, to readapt, restructure my life, I decided to do a voluntary assisted death. I did the plan to go to Switzerland. I didn't see that I wanted to go to the end because I didn't find it necessary. I wanted to go and say goodbye with the people I love and being able to smile and being able to be in charge of myself. You know, not doped or without knowing. Another dream I've had was to die conscious. to know I'm dying, with the intention to capture a fleeting understanding of that line between life and death. Yes. However, that has shortened, and then we deal with it. I deal with it as it comes.
You've shared, right from the very first day you found out, you've shared so many times with me your changing thoughts, your changing emotions. And I honestly have to say that it still is deeply amazing, extraordinary for me to know that, your expression of joy, choosing joy, that night itself, when you danced, I was seated all night. You were dancing. And next morning, you told me you had news to tell me, and then when you told me the details the next day, I honestly shattered. But there you were speaking about, wanting to keep on what it is that you love, what is it that brought meaning to you, and to preserve what you felt, was important to your mind, your as you said, to be conscious, throughout the experience. And for that, I think sometimes we have no words for that. One of the things we discussed was whether or not the way, Eugenia, we have dealt with our life crisis, whether it's changed over time, right? Because even though the core of us remains the same, facets of us change through time because of experience, because of age, because of what we choose to confront. So looking back at, how I managed, for example, the first sort of like really deep crisis in 2002, 2003, as I shared earlier, at that time I thought, I had inherited a good dose of stoicism from my mom growing up. She's an amazing woman, a cancer survivor. She has had ruptured appendicitis and 6 kids, and she manages all of that with a great deal of zen. But there was avoidance. There was not a moving through the pain, but there was a leaping over the pain. And while it served its purpose at that time, it got me going forward. And I went on to have my kids. I think that the change today is in the recent crisis that I, have been facing intensely, which is a conversation for another time. I've been, on the one hand, very surprised at how much more fear I feel, how much more vulnerable I am. And the initial, sense of perhaps not judgment, but sorrow almost was like, oh my God, have I not learned to become stronger as I mature? But then again, I realized that part of that's got to do with actually becoming a mom has changed me a lot. I used to joke that I didn't really feel fear until I became a mom. That sense of being more vulnerable as well, when your inner life is explored at the deeper level. So the more I explore who I am, the more willing I am to acknowledge these places in me that are still in shadows, that perhaps has some pain and some fear, then the greater that pain and that suffering will be at that point in time. So while I've been disconcerted in more recent days, especially when things happen to other people, I've realized that my need for certainty for myself is one thing, but I'm at my weakest when I'm afraid about someone else or someone else's well-being. So getting to know that has invited me to pour in greater exploration in a way, greater meditation, greater prayer. My faith is very important to me, and to dig deeper and say, what is it, that I can lean into in a bigger way to help me not just discover the spaces where I am weakest, where I'm most afraid, but to actually invite people, loved ones, and my own self-love, which, again, we'll talk about that in a moment. And that has been my journey of addressing the different kind of rough edges that life has presented to me. Has it changed for you? Has your ability to deal with what you are, working with today, that joy that you find? Whenever I think that, I've scraped my knees, or my kids, my friends tell me that they're going through a challenge, I tell them that you, with your oxygen device, John through the botanic gardens, and you can still find so much joy in the little flower and that little leaf and the breeze. And I think that is amazing. But has that always been a part of you, Eugenia?
Well, give you a context and a brush stroke. By the time I was 12, I was on my knees saying, I'll be a different woman than my mother. My mother carried with her a lot of pain, a lot of transgenerational pain that wasn't even hers. Her mother, her grandmother. I didn't know it then, but I made that decision at that time, 12. I'll be different. That fast forward then took me in a huge journey. So that decision when I closed my company and say I'm going into the personal development area, I started teaching meditation. That was not a snap decision, because I'd already discovered that for anything to change, for me to be different than my mother, there was something that was programmed in my subconscious by my upbringing that I had to change. And that was a huge, long journey. And I knew, at one point, like all of us, I think that is not an overstatement. At the end of the day, and more than 1,000 clients I've seen, patients, what do you want? I want to be happy. I was no exception. Because I didn't see happiness in alignment with this pain or compulsion or fear and all of that. So slowly and slowly, I went deeper and deeper on what happiness meant. And what it came to me when I found peace, when I stepped into the ashram. Before I stepped into the ashram, all those courses that I did, I knew that happiness was deep within. But the journey, our psyche cannot take everything we are learning every time. The psyche is incapable. We cannot change programming that is in the subconscious from when we're children, just because we are aware that programming is there and is toxic and is hurting us. It's a journey, and we are changing every step of the journey. Growing is like a little seed that comes off the ground, and then it begins to change every step of the journey to eventually mature and give fruit. But every step of the journey, that little seed that is no longer a seed, is a shoot, could be a tree, is perfect as it is. So that led me to a greater understanding for happiness. My need to be perfect disappeared. My need to regret what I would have done before and could have done it differently disappeared. And I got closer and closer to this fundamental state of being that lies at the very bottom. Over this is happiness, and then come peace, and then come congruency. And I fought so hard, not in an aggressive way, in a way as my friend, to really not give up, to be able to, what I think, what I say, what I do, what I feel is in alignment. And in that process, I was changing all the time. So by the time I got to this situation where I have a limited time span, I know I have a terminal illness, so they call it, a condition, I am totally at peace. I accept it is what it is. And when I suffer, because physical suffering, emotional suffering, because of the fits that may or may not come, depending on the medicament cocktails that I'm willing to take, because I said to some, I say no, you know, I'm able to find that balance. I'm able to recall myself home.
Yeah. You brought up change, changing. Things don't stay constant, right?
The only constant is change.
Yes. And that's so true, because not only is the change what we are experiencing because we are changing, but the external circumstances are also changing. So
people around us.
Absolutely. People, things, right? Situations. But I'm sure for all of us, we think about, again, the kind of, you know, is it really possible to thrive? Is it possible to live extraordinarily? It's fine that we dig deep and find the courage or find the resilience, but is it really possible to thrive? And we had that conversation several times, Eugenia, right? And when it came to me, I think one of the things I was sharing that in my, again, younger days, in the more youthful mindset that I had, especially when there's a perfectionistic side, you know, to me, to thrive or to be successful or to be happy tends to have a greater absolute to it. But when you go through the experiences that you do in life, and again, when your inner life becomes more visible to you, becomes richer, you realize that nothing is also absolute, and it changes. So there are moments when you are in deep crisis. There are days where you are sunk, when I'm sunk to the bottom of the well, where I feel that, you know, I'm submerged, and you're not sure whether you can get up for air, but you do. And you get your nose up above the water. And for a few moments, at that time, you find within yourself the desire, the drive, the ability to be determined and to plant some seeds. And whether that seeds is doing something for someone, or whether in your case, for example, it's writing your book, or you know, your art, for example, investing in your art book, that is the seed of creating something. And so my definition of when I thrive has become more about those pockets of time where you rise up and you recreate and you live and you allow for things to still materialize and develop instead of sitting at the bottom all of the time. So thriving or living life extraordinarily, again, is very much like a flow. There isn't that constant, but it's invited in us and through us, especially when courage is high. And again, courage and fear is always in a flow and ebb state as well for me, speaking personally. It comes in waves. And when the fear subsides at times, then you find that the courage rides high, and you plant and you develop and you recreate at that time. So if I relate that to courage as well, to me, courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage comes and is only necessary actually when there is a challenge, when you are at risk, when you feel the fear, but its ability to notice it, to feel it, and to acknowledge it, and then to actually this time round try to move along with it, so that with maturity you actually let things that are robbing you of that peace or that calm, that steadiness, you let it really have an opportunity to develop into something else rather than avoiding and leaping over it.
Yeah, I think for me, the first thing that led me to be here as I am going through was when I changed attitude of mind. Because if the attitude of mind is, for me, was not there, I could not have thrived. And we talk about thriving and surviving. For me, surviving was not good enough anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, surviving, being so close to death or to end or to finish. You know, when I was a survivor for years. So I had to change my attitude of mind from being a victim, which it was in my culture, it was in my religion, it was in my mother's upbringing, my family's upbringing, of being a victim, coming from a point of a victim. I had to, that was the first thing that I had to change, because that pervaded everything else in my life. That feeling, you know, acting, the attitude of mind of a victim. And then, of course, I hit bottom ground when I realized if anything is to be, it is only up to me, you know. And at that point, I felt that was a huge burden on my shoulders. Oh my God, why does everything have to be up to me? And then that began to transform, because that meant freedom. If it is up to me, then I am free. I don't depend on other people. I don't depend on anything. And if my attitude of mind is the right attitude of mind, come what may come, that is out of my control, I can control how I respond to the situation. So I am free. That was pivotal to me. Absolutely pivotal, to move my frame of mind, my attitude, my perspective on existence as a victim to being responsible and that sense of freedom eventually got me to peace and also got me into a joy that lies at the bottom. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Eugenia. So there is a question that I see on the participants' Q&A, which actually dovetails right into one of the things that we were going to chat about as well, which is we talk about courage, we talk about strength, but you know, for all of us, even if we're not facing deep disruptions at this point in time, we would always, you know, love to have a magical toolkit maybe that would help us deal with life's challenges, rough cuts that we may face, God forbid, you know, down the road. And this question here that's asked by Chris that says, can both of us describe what provided the courage and determination to overcome the disruptions that occurred? And was it self-strength that we discovered, or was it family, close friends of faith? So maybe starting, you know, from my perspective, well, there's no real panacea. Through my life, through all of the crises that I have faced, and with some very deep disruptions over recent times as well, I think of what I call upon as a pyramid. It stands up for me a lot of the time, and so rather than paint the picture in words, perhaps last night I just thought of a visual to represent that. And if we can have that up on the screen, maybe I can share how it supports me through disruptions. So for me, at the apex of the pyramid is my beacon. It is what uplifts me. It is what pulls me up the days and the times when I really feel that I'm drowning or close to despair, at times of deep challenge, and that's my faith. For me, it is God, and for others, it may be something else. It could be a different faith. It could be a belief in something larger than oneself, or it could be actually optimism, a perspective that you call upon, a universal kind of strength. but that is my beacon. My anchor, my two anchors, is definitely love and support. And I think it was Leo Tolstoy who wrote to Gandhi at one point in time, saying that love is the only way to rescue humanity from all of life's ills. So I think love, when it comes from intimate friends, from family, really is invaluable in shoring us up, to have someone to talk to who doesn't judge, someone who doesn't pity, but comes from a total understanding of who we are, where we are, and supports us through all of those challenges. The other anchor really is digging deep into my core values. It is something that remains constant, and things around us, the external circumstances may besiege us and things may fall apart, become unrecognizable. But if we are familiar with our core values, the sense of self-worth, the strengths that we are familiar with can actually be called upon. So oftentimes, not just for myself, but in my coaching, when clients face their crisis, instead of going out there and trying to deal straight away with the problem from a place of weakness, we often call upon our inner strength. And then there are things that can be learned to be done in specific approaches, the skills and approaches. It covers one of the biggest things, perspective. Eugenia, you spoke about that as well. Yeah, changing one's core beliefs, changing one's perspective, adopting the attitude of gratitude, for example. Things may be in a really bad place or a challenging place, but being grateful, you said earlier beautifully, seeing opportunities instead of challenges. That attitude is going to uplift us and help us through the challenges. Then of course, there's meditation, mindfulness, sunshine, exercise to get the endorphins and serotonin in, hobbies that we can actually occupy ourselves with, and the more formal tools of coaching, seeking counseling, therapy. And in cases where it really is needed, then there is medication. And again, Eugenia, we are so similar in some ways. It is again something that we find a lot of joy and conversation around, but we are also so fundamentally different. You are an atheist, whereas for me, my faith is what pulls me up. How does that stand up for you?
Yeah, how does it stand for me? Is quite interesting, because while you're doing that, I did a little thing of my own there. You know, where I stand in the center with awareness, and then my family is a source of strength. The love of my family, my friends are a source of strength. Nature is a huge source of strength for me, together with these elements. And then a whole lot of personal characteristics that I've already ingrained in my character, you know, that is that inner strength, that positive attitude with life, that thinking that I can manage my mind. That is why it's so extraordinarily important for me to have my mind not taking anything that will affect me. Because if it is affected, then I lose control of the bits and pieces. Yes, as an atheist, I don't have that. That for me, yes, I'm sure if God exists, it will be part of you. It's inside and outside. But I don't have that connection. But I do have that connection with people. I have a communion with you when we're having those conversations. I'm deeply connected. I feel we are different, but we are so much the same. I feel connected to the universe, to everybody. Yes, with some people, the energies don't match. They don't match. They're going in different directions, or they are affected, or they can be toxic energies that if I come close, I'm hurt. So I need to go back. you know, but the inner strength that is inside me allows me to do those choices, to make those choices. The inner strength that is within me, that ability to have my mind feel and think and process and implement, that allows me to make those hard choices of what is good for me, is toxic for me, or where I can be or cannot be. So when I feel this, first I may go, I went down in the hole when I was told, oh, it's not going to be, I was seeing the x-ray, so it was not news to me, and the tests were showing it. That is no longer that long. It could be 9 months, you know. So that changed the equation. That really took, there I went into the bottom drawer. Yeah. But what took me out is this inner strength, my family, my friends, and the purpose of living. How come? What do I want to live for right here, right now? And I found plenty to live for. So that I'm not ready to go in 3 months or 6 months. So I'm going to work through that. Not changing the final result, but expanding that final result, timing.
Thank you, Suguna, Eugenia. I think we have a couple of questions that probably we can address before we go. So Chris, thank you for your question, which has been addressed earlier. So from Anonymous, how do one face the ultimate disruption, confronting death and dying for oneself and one's loved one? What's the most important thing to focus on? I think we can tie in with, there's another question that says, practically, how can anyone accept that this is terminal and it will end? So maybe Eugenia, do you want to address that as well?
I've known I'm going to die since I have a sense of reason. So the fact that it's going to be ending, for me, it was a natural thing. I have no fear of death. I work through that. So for me, I want to be present when I die. You know, it was said that, somebody said, I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens. I want to be there when it happens. I absolutely want to be present. So I have no fear of it. You know, for me, if anything, I have excitement. I'm not looking for it. I'm not inviting death for dinner tonight, I can assure you, or tomorrow. However, when that time comes, I'm excited. You know, maybe it is like putting anesthesia. Boom, they switch the light off, or I go to sleep. I'm conscious, I'm aware, boom, I'm not conscious, not aware anymore. And I don't know I'm conscious and aware. Maybe not, you know, but I want to be present. It's like, it's the ultimate in life is to connect with death. It's the ultimate mystery. Will it unfold for me or it won't? I don't know. I have no idea. That's why I want to find out. Yeah.
And I like this question, or rather comment. There's still so much to do and so much to live for, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
So focus on what is
yes.
now,
yes.
coming. I mean, living life to the
yes. That's attitude of mind.
Yes.
That's the attitude of mind.
And that's, I was just reading a few days ago on the memoirs, the writings of Alice James. She's lesser known than her famous novelist brother, Henry James, but she's written beautifully, and she was always very, very ill for a very long time from her youth. And towards the end of her days, she said that the most, I think, supremely interesting moment in life, the only one, in fact, when living seems life, is when you're facing death. And to me, that was just, you know, in essence, it was beautiful. But what popped up in my mind, Eugenia, was you. That, you know, just another day, you know, another walk in the botanic gardens, another conversation, another hug with the loved ones. Like what you said to me a couple of days ago, you know, you just wanted to come and hug me and hold me. I mean, that was that touch, that presence. Being alive in itself is living for that moment. And definitely it's not easy, to say the least. For me there, I find it extraordinary that you deal with it the way you do. None of us know what will happen. We all have to confront our mortality, but what we go through is going to be so different. But that really is extraordinary.
So the only thing that I find at times very challenging to deal with is the symptoms. But again, the attitude of mind come, and like my doctor, he said, my doctor in the US, he said, Eugenia, there is no magic pill. This is what it is. So there is a deep acceptance, you know, that I just ride the wave and the wave, I just ride the wave. So every breath I take, like right now that I'm talking and I'm not coughing, I am so grateful for. I am so profoundly grateful for. You know, oh, I'm in heaven right here, right now. You know, I really am. I can talk straight. I'm not choking, I'm not coughing. Because another moment may be very different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eugenia, Suguna, do we have time to just address just one last question?
Yes, and I see that's one that just popped up, the last question.
Sure.
And the question is, perhaps I have nothing to die for and everything to live for, hence the fear. Do I make sense? I mean, that makes sense to me.
Well,
you know, it makes sense to me deeply, because we all have, you know, things that we treasure in our lives. For me, it may be different because of my faith. I think there is something to die for. Personally, I'm not afraid of dying myself, but my greatest fear, as I, you know, shared openly earlier, is when I became a mom in particular. My fear is of actually losing people that I love, because I have so much to live for with them and for them, especially my kids are very young. My youngest is only just turned 9 this month. And that fear of not being there, that fear of not holding, seeing, watching them through, you know, moments of their growth and their lifetime is very real. It makes you feel really raw. But again, it is really about, you know, choosing that moment to feed on the fear, not let the fear feed you when it comes to those moments, and say, so what am I going to do next? So when it comes to loved ones, my mom, my family, my kids, I tend to overcome it by grabbing on what I'm grateful for that moment. And then I try to do something or to say something. So I feed on the fear to create something. So if that makes sense to you too, Andy.
Yes, I think it's an incredibly beautiful existential question. So whoever that individual is, it would be extremely enriched to do an inner search, an inner exploration, because it feels that way right here, right now, to that individual. However, inside, the answers are inside. Sometimes it's about knowing how to access them, how to get there. So I'll be happy to talk with them anytime with this person. This is what I love to do, you know, to explore, to guide someone in that inner search so they can find their own truth. Might not be mine, might be like yours, might not be yours or mine, but it's theirs, because we have to own our own truth. I think very, very few things are universal truth. In a handful, change is permanent, we're all going to die. There is a handful. The rest is all personal truth. You know, even when it comes to God, I'm an atheist, very easy, you know. 99.9% don't believe they exist, but I live a 0.1% that I'm an ignorant person. What do I know? in my human condition. I believe that, but also I have no way to prove to you that there is no God in an absolute way, just like you cannot prove to me in an absolute way that there is a God. So, you know, we all find our truth. And that is where the key is for this individual to self-inquire and find what is life purpose for them, or death purpose for that matter.
Thank you for the great and deep sharing. Indeed, today we learn more about thriving, not just surviving, through courage and resilience. These are ways to overcome crisis. So thank you so much, Eugenia. Thank you so much, Suguna, for your time, sharing your great journeys. So audience, if you would like to reach out to the speakers, feel free to send an email to me. I'll be happy to connect you. I'm sure there are questions which we could address it offline as well. So we look forward to having you join us at our next webinar, which is next Thursday. This is on the ROI of investing in life. Do join me and Agape Connecting People, where we will share more about growing a business that achieves both financial success and social impact. So thank you again. I'll see you next Thursday. Thank you, Eugenia. Thank you, Suguna.
Thank you, Suguna.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.